The Joe Rogan Experience.
But I remember, and I think in my mind is undeniably the GOAT, as again, a just above casual fan, Jon Jones.
Jon Jones is the GOAT.
He's the GOAT.
Now it's undeniable.
It's undeniable.
There was all this debate until he submitted Ciryl Gane and became the heavyweight champion. No one can fuck with that.
Smashed him, bro.
Smashed
and
him.
Ciryl looked kind of unbeatable up until the Francis fight.
Well, the Francis fight exposed one aspect of his game that you're never going to beat Jon in, and that's the wrestling.
Yeah.
And then everybody said, well, he didn't know that Francis was going to wrestle him. Given. Francis is not the caliber of wrestler or even in the realm of Jon Jones.
No doubt.
Jon Jones has been wrestling since he was 12 years old. He took down Daniel Cormier, who's an Olympic-level wrestler.
Yep.
There is not a guy in the world that can say that you could start wrestling at 29 years old. I mean, you'd have to be the freakiest of freak athletes to be able to compete with that guy to start wrestling when Ciryl Gane started wrestling.
Right.
The gap is just too wide to cross.
Right. So I think what I was thinking is, and when I bring up Jon Jones, is I remember the first Jon Jones fight I watched was when he got DQ'd against Matt Hamill.
Okay.
From the 12-6 elbows.
Yeah.
Right? That was my first experience with him. The next thing I feel like I remember, and I may have seen some of his fights in between then, but is when he like beat up this guy that was like trying to rob this lady like the night of a fight.
That was the day he fought for the title.
Right.
The day he fought for the title, he chased down a guy who robbed someone and tackled him and held him until the cops came.
Right.
And then,
went
and fought Shogun and became the youngest ever UFC champion.
Yep. So here's what I'm getting at is and this is going to be just kind of, I'm interested in your take on this because I watched it happen with Jon Jones and I feel like I watched it happen with Kamaru as well, where it was like Jon and Kamaru as they came up, right? It's like Jon does this thing where he stops this robber and he wins the belt. He beats Shogun, who is this kind of like, you know, him and Lyoto were these kind of like unfigure-outable guys to me as a fan at that time, right? Like guys like, how do you beat Lyoto Machida? You can't, because you can't even touch the guy, right, at that time. And they were like inherently these like good guys that everybody was rooting for. Mm-hmm. And then both of them became these like epically long-range champions that then became sort of like villains.
Kamaru was never a villain.
I feel like he is.
Really?
To
How
me
so?
as a fan, again, who doesn't know anything, and maybe it's it comes back to maybe the celebrity like ego thing, like to the camera as a fan. Again, I've never met the guy. He's probably great. But just as a casual watcher, I went from going, I'm rooting for this guy, to then it be like the way he talks about himself. And I feel like Jon Jones was the same way to me, is they became this like really like, and then Jon got in all this kind of like turmoil-y stuff. Like,
well, I don't think you can compare the two. And here's two reasons why. One, have you ever seen Kamaru talk? Like, you ever seen Kamaru on my podcast? Mm-mm. He's one of the nicest, most down-to-earth, friendly, smiley, fun guys. There's what you're seeing is Kamaru, the destroyer.
The dog, dude.
The dog is ready to go to war.
100%.
That's the difference. And
that's what I was trying to ask.
He's
like
signaling to all the other people, I'm going to smash you.
Right.
And that's what he's signaling.
Yeah. And that's what I think I was asking is like, is that all just perceived by me, or is that...
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, that's part of the fun of being a fan.
Sure.
You know, deciding what you like and what you don't like, and personalities that you root for and personalities you root against. And sometimes you root against a guy and he wins you over because he's so goddamn good. You're like, I wanted that motherfucker to lose, but he's the fucking greatest.
Yeah.
Jon is very different than Kamaru. Jon is what I would describe is there's human beings that have different temperament and different minds and different mentality and a ruthless competitive drive that's almost terrifying to the ordinary person. That's Jon Jones. Jon Jones is a bad guy who's trying to be a good guy. Right. But that guy, if we were living 1,000 years ago, he would be on a horse with the biggest battle axe, waiting in the back, hacking heads off, and everybody would be running. And
Right.
those people have always existed.
Right.
These dominators have always existed.
Yeah.
But John is like a genuinely sensitive, intelligent guy
Right.
who's trying to do the right thing.
Right.
But he's a fucking conqueror.
Right.
He's a fucking conqueror. That's the thing that's inside of him that leads him to be the GOAT. And without that, you don't get there. You don't get that. You don't get a Mike Tyson without that.
For
you don't
sure.
get a Muhammad Ali without that. You don't get a Marvin Hagler without that.
Yep.
You don't get that. That there's a thing inside some people that is a driving force that allows them to overcome the greatest around them. It's a Michael Jordan. It's a
100%.
There's a thing, man.
Tom Brady.
And those motherfuckers are hated. They're always hated.
for sure.
Because you have to hate them because you can't beat them.
It's the 260-inch deer, dude.
Yes.
Because me and my buddies were talking. It's like they're like, man, that's not the deer of a lifetime. That's the deer of 10 lifetimes.
Yes. Most people will never see that.
Right.
But it's even more than that because you can just accidentally stumble across the deer of a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
You can't accidentally beat John Jones. There's a thing about.
So he's GOAT over Khabib.
He's GOAT over everybody. Now,
Khabib's too.
yeah, Khabib is in the conversation, but Mighty Mouse is in that conversation too. Mighty Mouse, to me, if you want to look at like a technical expression of the greatness of martial arts, he's as good as anybody's ever done it. When Mighty Mouse was the flyweight champion, and the only problem is besides Cejudo and a couple other guys like Benavidez and. He was not dealing with guys that are of the caliber of the guys that John Jones was facing. John Jones was facing Gustafsson, Glover Teixeira. He was facing Daniel Cormier. He was facing the elite of the elite, and he never fucking lost, even when he was doing coke and he wasn't even training.
Right.
That's how goddamn good John Jones is.
Right.
And when John Jones talks about fights, though, when I had him on the podcast, one of the things that he talked about. Some people don't really watch tape or they only watch a little bit. They let their coaches do the work. John Jones studies everyone. He studies their tendencies. He gets in his mind how when you throw that left kick, you make this little step with your right foot. You might do this thing when you shoot for a takedown where you keep your you keep your head on one side every time. You might do this thing where when someone throws a right hand, you always lean to the left. You might do and John Jones picked up that tendency, and that's how he knocked out Daniel Cormier. He knew Daniel Cormier has a tendency to duck towards his right side because he goes for that single on the left leg, and John caught him with the perfect head kick. But it wasn't by an accident. He set that up. He set it up just like Leon Edwards set up that head kick on Kamaru. There's a beauty to that that's just, man, in the middle of chaos and anxiety and fear and the fucking fog of war, you figure out a way to connect with this thing that you saw in tape and in training and in preparation. Right. So it's with John, it's not an accident that he's the GOAT. Even with his lack of training, even with it's just like he's so fucking talented that he almost needs another John Jones to make him compete the way make him train the way a lot of these other guys do. Like he's so good, he can beat those guys without being challenged by someone like him.
Right.
Because John Jones has never faced a John Jones.